Hi, dear students. I'm very pleased to present this course on postcolonialism. This course is addressed to semester 6 students. We are going to provide a brief, simple analysis to Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and my analysis of the novel is going to be guided or inspired by few scholars in the fields of colonial and post-colonial discourse, such as Edward Said, Frantz Fanon, and Aimé Césaire. Well, we are going to discuss in this course the novella of Conrad as one of the most wonderful pieces of literature that have marked the last century in the fields of colonial and post-colonial studies. And we are going to discuss basically themes and issues related to civilizing mission, for example, issues that are related to colonial, post-colonial discourse, racial discourse, and we're going to also to talk about a little bit about the notion of violence, and I'm going to tackle this issue from the perspective of Frantz Fanon. So basically, I'm going to start by one of the most insightful extracts of Edward Said, taken from Cultural Imperialism. So in this extract, Said talks about different images that are striking in this perpetual dialogue or encounter between the self and the other, the colonizer and the colonized, and also the East and the West. So it's a perpetual discourse that is featured with different ideas and images. So Edward Said talked about three main points actually in this quote. And the first one is about these rhetorical figures that we encounter in such pieces of literature related to colonial, post-colonial studies. These rhetorical figures in colonial descriptions actually, they describe the mysterious other, the mysterious East, the stereotypes of the African mind. And then another point is about the notions of the Western man or the white man bringing civilization to the African lands and African peoples. Then another very important point here actually is about these ideas and images we usually encounter while reading, for example, Conrad's novel or any other work that is related to colonial and post-colonial studies, ideas about extended punishment, as Edward Said called it, punishment that goes further to death sometimes. We encounter images of flogging, beating, and this it's also part of this interaction or violent interaction between the colonizer and the colonized. So basically or practically there are two significant factors that lead the empires to colonize the East. First, this mysterious Orient or mysterious East, it's characterized with darkness, impenetrability, incomprehensibility, and then the Western mindset or the white man's mindset of the African mind in general, which is premised by stereotypes, attitudes, conceptions, misconceptions, Eurocentrism, and so on and so forth. So, when you talk about darkness and the white man, of course, the white man comes to Africa or to the other's land and the other natives' land. The objective is to undarken, to enlighten. That's why we have, of course, because we have a dark culture, a dark continent, a dark space. The white man comes to undarken the space, to enlighten the space. And this is the theme which is related to civilizing mission. So enlightenment in the heart of darkness. This is the story of Belgian or British torch in the jungles of Congo, and it's the noble cause in the savage land. So the great cause in black, barbaric Africa. So the civilizing mission, or la mission civilisatrice in general, is based on this, on bringing the torch, the spark, the light, a dark place. And that's the excuse or the pretense that the white man is always, or has usually used to come and colonize the other continents or the other lands in general. So let me just pick up a few passages or a few just lines in the novel which stand for this mission civilisatrice. For example, Marlowe, the first thing he said in the novel or sketched out is, I had a passion for maps. So the white man is known and famous for exploration and discovery. And that's one of the reasons, of course, that he has legitimate reason to come and discover the other's land. I had got a heavenly mission to civilize you. So this line explicitly shows that one of the responsibilities of this journeying or this trip of Marlowe into the heart of darkness in Africa is a mission to civilize youth. So it's very explicit, actually. Then this mission civilisatrice is referred to by using different terms and conceptions, like the noble cause, for example, the great cause. Throughout the structure of the story, we encounter such notions and terms that talk about the white civilization. For example, another passage which stands for this white civilization or civilizing mission is that each station should be like a beacon, and I underline the word beacon here, on the road towards better things, a center for trade, of course. Well, there is commerce, there's trade, but also for humanizing, improving, instructing. I've been teaching one of these native women about the station. So there is teaching also. It's part of instruction of the white man's duty. So the civilizing mission has been premised on civilizing, humanizing, teaching, instructing. But what is striking is that we usually find the opposite instead, or other images that are just the opposite of what they purported to be in the first place. So what we encounter is killing, flogging, beating, punishment, cutting heads off. That's part of the civilizing mission. This is where the colonial discourse crumbles, and the post-colonial approach, of course, is to restate or to bring back this problem of these slippages of the colonial discourse. Let me pick up a very important passage here, which is about explicit colonialist enterprise mission. And for example, one of the characters in the novel said, "Get him hanged." Why not? Anything. Anything can be done in this country. That's what I say. Nobody here, you understand, here can endanger your position. So this very explicitly transforms Africa into a jungle where there is no law, no rules, no regulations, and no sanctions. Whatever you can do, whatever evil you can do it in Africa in full freedom. It's possible. There is no sanctions, no law. Okay, so darkness is related also to the white man in the novel, and it's always related to the white man because the white man comes to undarken, and the white man equals very simply civilizing mission. So a very simple syntactic analysis of the novel, we detect a number of words and terms that stand for enlightenment. So let's take, for example, beacon, signs, spark, noble cause, intelligence, progress, humanizing, great cause, and I would like to take also a name of the character, one of the main characters in this novel, which is Kurtz. So this Kurtz himself stands for the white man, the West, and the civilizing mission. So this character of Kurtz has always been praised in the novel, has always been eulogized throughout the structure of the novel. Let me take one of the passages again, or a few lines that show this eulogy. Mr. Kurtz was the best agent, the best. We find most of the time the superlative used here in a very positive sense. The best agent, an exceptional man, the greatest importance to the company, a man of many talents, eloquent, master. So nowhere in the story is Kurtz underestimated, actually. So he's being eulogized throughout the whole structure and scene sequences of the story. Kurtz, what's his significance in the story actually? So it's just like he's represented like God. He's a mystery instead. Okay, that's another side of Kurtz. But in terms of positive representation of this character of Kurtz, he's very efficient. And his efficiency is reflected too by using words, also notions like prodigy, genius, supernatural, great, prominent, etc. He's an epitome of colonialist enterprise, the paradox of empire's morals and ethics. He is also the paradox of empire's morals and ethics, on the other hand. So, in the destination or journey and final character to be sought, Marlowe has been looking for, has been seeking these Kurtz. But once he found him, actually, he was shocked by different other images. So Kurtz equals, actually, in post-colonial studies, I mean, from post-colonial perspective, a gap. And this gap is two things, actually. So what the colonialist enterprise purports, which is morals, ethics, humanizing, teaching, instructing, philanthropy, altruistic missions. But on the other hand, we have the colonial realities of Africa. And these colonial realities, the very plain damage the empire inflicts on Africa and its peoples. So I was talking about this huge gap between what the colonialist enterprise purports to be or to be doing in Africa and the colonial realities that are represented by the damage inflicted on the colonized people. So how? Kurtz has been throughout the novel referred to as God, an omniscient agent featured with high efficiency and benefit for his empire. But Marlowe got so shocked once the first moment he discovered what Kurtz was actually in the novel, in the story. So he discovered him as a subject worth pitying, actually, worth sympathizing with. And that's the mystery, that's the paradox of this character of Kurtz, indeed. So this discrepancy between what the colonialist enterprise purports to be and what the colonial realities that are happening indeed in Africa shows also this discrepancy between the East and the West. The visualization of Kurtz is on the one hand, on one side, but the colonial realities are on the other side, totally different. So this is also reminiscent of what? Of this joint and balanced encounter, paradoxical relationship between the West and the East, between Europeans, white men, and Africans or Orientals, the other. And this just brings back to my memory one of Emissary's arguments that there could have been a very good contact, actually, between Europe and Africa, rather than this contact of colonial encroachment. So, now let me move to talk a little bit about terror, or the issue of terror and violence in the novel. So I'll go back to Edward Said's quote and take just part of it, which is very interesting actually and very relevant to our analysis here. And the image was about these disturbingly familiar ideas about flogging, death, or extended punishment being required when they misbehaved. They refers, of course, to the native man, misbehaved or being rebellious because they mainly understood force and violence. So my point here is we're going to analyze this outcome of violence between the colonizer on the one hand and the colonized on the other hand. And what characterizes the relationship between the two is violence and trauma. So, here, I would like to use Frantz Fanon, The Wretch of the Earth, an extract which is very relevant, pertinent to my analysis, and I'm going to read the extract. Frantz Fanon says, let us decide not to imitate Europe. Let us combine our muscles and our brains in a new direction. Let us try to create the whole man. whom Europe has been incapable of bringing to triumphant birth. So the idea of the whole man here, Frantz Fanon hints to this relationship between the colonizer and the colonized, the victimizer and the victimized. He explains the consequential dimension of this relationship, focusing on the different disorders inflicted on the victim. In other words, it means that colonialism does not only bring about physical pain, but it also brings about psychopathic pain and psychological pain that's even worse. So Fanon here, or Fanon's idea here actually, is transmission of a message to the victim, warning him that the ideals of imitation are not really worth going for. That for Fanon, emulation probably should be better, should be sought instead. That's the idea of the whole man. So the European man does not prove to be an upright man because of those atrocities and the damage that he inflicted or he has inflicted on the colonized. He is not to be sought for as, or to be imitated, actually. That's the idea of the whole man here. So I'm just going to pick up one of the very important passages in the novel about violence, and where one of the characters was speaking on page 11, he said, but he had been a couple of years already out there, and I remember he was a Danish character in the novel, engaged in noble cause. You know, and he probably felt the need at last of asserting his self-respect in some way. Therefore, he whacked the old nigger mercilessly, while the big crowd of his people watched him. I'm taking this passage because it's very interesting for me, at least for me. Why? Because it shows this paradoxical relationship between the self-esteem and self-respect and triumphant side that the European man has been looking for while coming to Africa, but at the same time, it depicts the level and the degree of damage that the same white man exercises on Africans or natives. Okay, so if you take this line, he whacked the old nigger mercilessly while a big crowd of his people watched him. So this is how the civilizing mission is flipped. It turns against its own principles, actually. That's the idea. The noble becomes savage, and the savage becomes noble savage. Self-respect that the white man has been seeking turns into disgrace, very unfortunately. So through what is called civilizing mission, the empire is engaged into the construction of ruthless and evil agents, criminals, cruel hunters, monsters, and the process applies to both the colonizer and the colonized. So I'm taking the example of the colonizer himself as represented by the character of Cours. So Cours in the end was a mystery. He was worth pitying and sympathizing with. So Marlowe tells us in the end of the story that Cours is just like a psychopathic character or person. So that's the outcome of colonial encroachment and imperialism in general. But I would like to take also another example, which is totally the opposite. And this I bring about here Saleh's seasonal migration to the north, and how the natives themselves and the colonized, because of that physical damage and psychological damage, of course, the colonized also becomes a victim. And here I remember Said and Mustafa Said in seasonal migration to the north, who also was one type of person or character who had a cruel side of personality and character, especially when he killed a British woman. So the point or the argument is that violence does not generate any good. Violence only generates damage and psychopathic and psychological troubled outcomes, both on the colonizer and on the colonized. So these passages stand for the failure of civilizing mission, hence the failure of the white man, and hence the failure of humanity in general, and the human cause. So, which is one way to see Conrad's actually novel as critical of colonial discourse. So maybe apologetic to Conrad in this sense, that the whole story, of course, it shows or displays a number of problems and atrocities and crimes vis-a-vis the colonized or the native Africans. However, it also shows this side where the colonialist enterprise has just crumbled and has turned against itself. So we may be apologetic to Conrad by bringing to the fore his disappointment, dissatisfaction, and disapproval of imperialism and colonialism. So Marlowe confesses, and this is a great passage that shows actually probably this apology, that there was an air of plotting. Marlowe speaks here. There was an air of plotting. I underline the word plotting about that station, but nothing came of it. Of course, it was unreal as everything else, as the philanthropic pretense of the whole concern, as their talk, as their government, as their show of work. The only real feeling was a desire to get appointed to a trading post where ivory was to be had, so that they could earn percentages. So this passage very simply is very explicitly displaying the intention behind the encroachment. What else was civilizing mission about but private interests? The whole mission was an illusion, and it was just a big lie. So the damage inflicted on colonial subject shows, to use Aimé Césaire's, and here I bring about or invoke Aimé Césaire's words, to use Aimé Césaire, how colonization works to decivilize the colonizer, to brutalize him, to awaken him, to degrade him, to awaken him to buried instincts, to covetousness, violence, race hatred, and moral relativism. That's Aimé Césaire. So the civilizer becomes the uncivilized, and it's a huge, terrific reverse shock between quotes and quotes. So as I mentioned before, that this colonialism or colonial encroachment in general does not generate any positive outcomes. So the negative outcomes is that the characters in the novel and of course the citizens or subjects in reality become victims, whether is it the colonizer or the colonized, of course, they become victims of colonial encroachment. So this psychological trauma is very much highlighted by Franz Fanon. And before I conclude this course, of course, I just would like to go back to this analogy and draw an analogy between the character of Kurtz in Heart of Darkness and the character of Mustafa Said in Season of Migration to the North. So both characters are mysterious, they're featured with mystery. So we have two narrators that come to talk to us about a character that is very important or more important in the novel, and they've been seeking. And then both Mustafa Said and Kurtz carry some seeds of revenge, violence, and atrocity indeed. So going back to Tayyip Saleh's Season of Migration to the North, for example, that we find out that the character of Mustafa Said is featured with probably the same characteristics or features that Kurtz is featured with, in fact. So while Mustafa Said went to Britain to probably take revenge, and the idea of the argument here is it the right path? Is it the right course to take revenge intellectually or sexually? Kurtz instead is very much explicit in the novel that he came for percentages. He wanted to earn more percentages, and he's very much eulogized in the novel. So the psychological trauma is very much represented, very well represented by these two characters in two different novels. And of course, worthless to mention that Season of Migration to the North is believed to be a parody to Heart of Darkness. But is it a good path, or is it a good course, a good reaction to the colonial act, or even the literature of Conrad? That's an argument still to discuss. So while Aimé Césaire insists on the idea of the civilization or the colonialism goes against the colonizer, that it comes to decivilize the colonizer and to brutalize him. And it's a totally reversed shock. Frantz Fanon insists this idea of violence, that colonialism and imperialism just come up with psychological and psychopathic people, and it touches both the colonizer and the colonized. So that's probably a kind of a simple analogy of two short stories in terms of violence and in terms of this outcome of colonial and imperial encroachment. But the conclusion, of course, is that there's more evil than civilization indeed. So the main conclusion here, as I see it, is that the colonialist enterprise has never been in colonial territories to civilize. It has rather been there to evilize, if I may say so. Thank you very much.